He didn't scream. He didn't roar. He didn't make a sound. He simply appeared. From the sky. Too fast to process. Too big to ignore. A shadow gliding in silence stretched across the jungle floor. And by the time you looked up, it was already over. Quetzalcoatlus, a name borrowed from an ancient god. But no divinity lived in those wings. This was not a creature of myth. It was real. And it was large enough to blot out the sun. Imagine standing on warm Cretaceous soil, surrounded by dense tropical ferns, the air humid and buzzing with insects the size of your hand. Herds of horned dinosaurs pass through the clearing. But something isn't right. They freeze, not from a sound, but from a shadow. The shape above is almost abstract, a silhouette so large it doesn't compute. Its wingspan eclipses anything alive today. It glides without flapping, cruising on thermals with impossible grace. No feathers, no engines, just hollow bones and evolutionary ambition. Now shrink yourself down in your mind. Place a human next to it, or better yet, a giraffe. Even that towering mammal wouldn't measure up. Quetzalcoatlus may have stretched 10 meters across the wings, yet weighed only about 200 to 250 kilograms. Its body wasn't built for bulk. It was engineered for flight efficiency, its skeleton more air than bone. Evolution didn't sculpt it to kill, it sculpted it to fly, high, far, and fast. And somehow that made it even more terrifying. But how could something that massive ever leave the ground? To understand that, you have to understand the Earth it ruled. In the final chapters of the Cretaceous, Earth was a different planet. Sea levels were higher, the continents were warmer, wetter, and greener. North America was split by an inland sea. What we now call Texas, New Mexico, and Montana was once a subtropical coastline. Forests sprawled, rivers snaked through fern-covered lowlands, and the air was thicker, not just with humidity, but with oxygen. Some estimates suggest that oxygen levels were significantly higher than today. Up to 30% of the atmosphere may have been pure O2, compared to 21% now. With more oxygen and warmer climates, animals grew big. Reptiles, insects, and birds pushed the limits of size. And in the skies, nothing pushed harder than the pterosaurs. But don't mistake them for birds. They're not. Pterosaurs are a separate branch of archosaurs, cousins to both dinosaurs and birds, but neither. And among them, Quetzalcoatlus was one of the last, and the largest. It had no beak like a falcon, no talons like an eagle, and no teeth. Just a long, pointed jaw, a lightweight weapon more suited for precision than brute force. It didn't need to tear through flesh. It needed to strike once, and hard. Its neck was a feat of biological engineering. Slender, flexible, yet strong enough to hold a skull nearly as long as a man is tall. Inside, its vertebrae weren't round like ours. They were shaped like hollow tubes with internal struts, like the spars of a suspension bridge. This gave the neck surprising strength with almost no weight. In motion, it didn't look like a raptor or a vulture. Some paleontologists think it moved more like a heron or a stork, walking through open plains or shallow water, scanning the ground, standing still. And then, snap! A sudden strike from above. It didn't need to chase, it waited. And if it took flight? It didn't run like a bird. It launched, using all four limbs, wings and legs. It would vault itself into the air like a massive spring uncoiling. Once airborne, it barely needed to flap. Thermals, rising warm air over open terrain, did the rest. Still, questions linger. How did it really feed? Was it truly a hunter? Or just a scavenger, gliding for miles to spot a carcass before vultures arrived? Some researchers argue that its enormous size and long jaw suggest it scavenged, spotting the dead before the smaller flyers could get there. But others believe in something bolder. What if Quetzalcoatlus hunted like a stork, stalking prey in wetland shallows, plucking fish or reptiles from the water? Or even more intriguingly, what if it was an ambush predator? Imagine a quiet clearing. A group of small, two-legged dinosaurs, perhaps ornithomimids or baby hadrosaurs, pick their way through the undergrowth. Then a gust of wind, a shift in light, and the air splits as something falls. Not a dive, a controlled drop. Wings folding just before impact. Beak outstretched, impact fatal. Its wings weren't made for tight turns. It wasn't agile in the air like a falcon. But it didn't need to be. It was the sky's guillotine. All it needed was surprise. Yet for all its grandeur, we don't know exactly what Quetzalcoatlus was in ecological terms. Its fossil record is incomplete, mostly bones, not behavior. And behavior doesn't fossilize. What it left behind is a puzzle, a predator's proportions with a scavenger's grace, a body built for motion, yet a skull designed for patience. The idea that it scavenged is appealing in its simplicity. With such a massive wingspan, Quetzalcoatlus could scan hundreds of square kilometers from the air. It may have ridden thermals above open plains, descending only when it spotted a carcass. But if so, why the narrow beak? Why the long, precise neck? Scavengers today, like vultures or marabou storks, use broad, strong beaks to tear, to rip, to feed on corpses. Quetzalcoatlus had none of that. Its beak was surgical, its neck flexible, its limbs long and stilt-like. What if it didn't wait for death, but dealt it itself? There's a second theory, that Quetzalcoatlus hunted small animals directly. Like a crane in a marsh or a heron by a pond, it may have stalked fish, lizards, or even small dinosaurs, stepping carefully, silently, using its towering frame to avoid detection. And when the moment came, it would strike. Fast, a downward jab, a twist of the head, a lift. The prey wouldn't even realize what had happened. There's even a third, more speculative idea, that Quetzalcoatlus didn't just glide and stalk, it dove. From heights of hundreds of meters, it may have folded its wings, aligned its body, and dropped like a missile, slamming into prey before they could react. Not with claws, not with teeth, but with mass and momentum. It's not entirely fantasy. Some birds, like skuas or pelicans, perform sudden drops to snatch prey. But with a wingspan longer than a bus, such maneuvers in Quetzalcoatlus would require precision, calculation, and perhaps intelligence. Could it have hunted at night? Some researchers suggest that, like owls, Quetzalcoatlus might have evolved eyes adapted to dim light, allowing it to fly or stalk under the cover of dusk. Others reject the idea, pointing to the wide-open habitats it lived in, where daylight was essential. Still, the mystery lingers. A creature this massive, with such specific adaptations, doesn't exist without purpose. And if not a pure hunter or scavenger, maybe it was something else, something in between, an ecological wild card, a flying opportunist. But then comes the ultimate what if. What if Quetzalcoatlus hadn't vanished? Because here's the truth. Its extinction was not the result of bad design. It wasn't weak, it wasn't flawed, it was simply unlucky. 66 million years ago, the Earth changed, fast. A rock the size of a city slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula. The explosion released more energy than 1 billion nuclear bombs. Shockwaves, firestorms, global darkness. The sky became ash. Photosynthesis stopped. Food chains collapsed. Quetzalcoatlus, with its huge body and massive wings, suddenly faced a world with no thermals, no sunlight, and no prey. It needed space. It needed energy. And all of it was gone. The big died first. The small inherited what remained. Birds, the smaller, more adaptable cousins of the dinosaurs, slipped through the cracks. Quetzalcoatlus did not. But imagine an alternate timeline. The asteroid misses. The planet goes on. And Quetzalcoatlus survives. In this world, evolution doesn't pause. It rewrites. Quetzalcoatlus shrinks, just a little, becomes more efficient, more specialized. One branch adapts to cityscapes, a modern aerial predator with a 4-meter wingspan, silent at night, stalking rooftop pigeons and rats like a living drone. Another lineage adapts to coastlines, diving into mangrove shallows, using its long beak to spear fish beneath the waterline. A sort of featherless, leathery albatross with a killer's instinct. And the most bizarre possibility, a line that evolves larger brains, enhanced memory, advanced eyesight, maybe even modular reasoning, the ability to solve problems, store mental maps, adapt to novelty. Not sapient, not tool-using, but aware. A sky ruled not just by flyers, but by thinkers. Speculative biology lets us ask these questions not to indulge fantasy, but to reflect on the narrowness of our history. For every species we know, there are hundreds we never saw, and countless more that could have been. But the real story is this. The skies did go silent. When the dust settled from the impact, when the fires burned out and the planet cooled, the large pterosaurs were gone. And with them, an entire evolutionary experiment ended. Their extinction wasn't just biological, it was strategic. Large animals require more energy. Bigger wings mean greater surface area, but also higher costs. With thermals gone and prey reduced, the sky was no longer viable for giants. Birds with their smaller frames and fast generation cycles adapted quickly. They diversified. They inherited the wind. Quetzalcoatlus, with its massive wings and specialized anatomy, had no time to adjust. It had evolved for a stable world. But the world broke. And yet, even now, something about them lingers. They're gone, but not forgotten. Not because we knew them, but because we fear them. We don't have a word for this exact feeling. Not fear of predators or of heights, but the fear of something above. Watching, waiting. The sky is supposed to mean safety, escape, freedom. But when Quetzalcoatlus ruled it, the sky was a threat. We feel it in our nervous systems, in the ancient layers of the brain. The part that doesn't think, it just reacts. A shifting shadow, a sudden gust, the absence of bird song. We still flinch at those cues, because for millions of years they might have meant death. The shape of Quetzalcoatlus, long neck, pointed jaw, massive wings, doesn't match any modern threat. And yet something in us recoils. Why? Because the silhouette is enough. The shadow is enough. Even children feel it. Not the specific fear of a known predator, but the general panic of a shape that doesn't make sense. A darkness that moves too smoothly, too fast. You see it in nightmares, in monster designs, in alien spacecraft and prehistoric demons. They all borrow from the same template. The sky turned against us. It's not logical, it's emotional, a response from the time when life was fragile and death could fall from above. Even birds, the last living descendants of dinosaurs, don't trigger that response. We feed them, we admire them. But a featherless, silent glide? A beak with no expression? That's different. That's wrong. It touches something older than memory. Maybe it's because we no longer live under open skies. We've moved indoors, into cities, under roofs and wires. The heavens have become background. Airspace, drone lanes, flight corridors, empty. But the fear didn't disappear. It just has nowhere to go. And maybe that's why creatures like Quetzalcoatlus fascinate us. They are a reminder, not of monsters, but of a world that once had them. Not of evil, but of enormity. Not of horror, but of scale. Now the skies hum with machines, wings powered by turbines, noise without life. Quetzalcoatlus made no noise, and yet its silence filled the sky. That's what we lost. Not just the creature, but the possibility that the air itself could hold something that big, and that alive. In a sense, we didn't kill the monsters. We replaced them, and the sky became ours, but also a little less wild. The fossils are silent now. Compressed calcium, stone impressions, the echo of motion that once carved air into shock waves. We study them, measure them, compare ratios, calculate lift, but none of it captures the feeling of being beneath that shadow. Because when the wind shifts and you look up and see nothing, you're safe. But you also know something's missing, something that once soared over rivers and plains. That didn't roar, didn't scream, didn't need to. It simply arrived, and then, like a whisper in reverse, was gone. The sky no longer remembers it, but part of us still does. When we dream of giants, when we flinch at shadows, when we imagine what could come from above, we are remembering something that lived before us, not just a creature, but an idea. The idea that the sky itself was alive, and that life was not kind. It was majestic, efficient, unrelenting. And now, only silence remains. A silence we fill with satellites, with aircraft, with noise, but never again with wings like those. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe we were never meant to live under giants. But if you ever look up, and for a moment the clouds part, and you see the shape of something ancient, not real, not solid, but there, don't be afraid. It's only memory. The earth forgetting slowly, the sky remembering briefly, the moment before the world exhaled, and the shadow disappeared for good. When the sky turned to silence, the earth finally stopped flinching. But perhaps the silence we speak of was never truly silent. It's just that we stopped listening. The bones we dig from the ground are fragments of conversations we were never part of, dialogues between biology and time, motion and gravity. And in Quetzalcoatlus, those conversations reached their peak, not because it was the smartest, not because it ruled for long, but because it was the farthest the sky allowed anything to go. It wasn't just large, it was the limit, a living equation, balancing mass, lift, thermals, energy, and extinction. And in that balance, something strange happened. It crossed into symbolism. Other extinct animals don't do that. We don't look at trilobites and feel awe. We don't imagine ammonites returning from the deep. But Quetzalcoatlus, that shadow still flickers in our cultural vision. It's the ghost we never met, but somehow recognize. Because it dares us to think about thresholds, the point beyond which life cannot go, the ceiling of complexity in a gravity-bound world. That's why it matters, not because it hunted or scavenged, but because it tested what the sky could allow, and then vanished. And in doing so, it became a monument. We build monuments too, stone arches, iron towers, rocket trails, all trying to say, we were here, we touched the edge. But none of them glide, none of them whisper, none of them cast moving shadows across forests and rivers. None of them are alive. Quetzalcoatlus didn't build anything, but its body was a message, a kind of geometry in motion, proof that nature doesn't need permission to be outrageous. We think of evolution as practical, survival, adaptation, cost versus benefit. But sometimes it flirts with the absurd, with the spectacular, and then the meteor comes, and the absurd vanishes. We used to fear the sky because of what could fall from it. Now we fear it for what might not return. Space is silent. It doesn't echo. No thermals, no predators, no giants. We've replaced the world of sky creatures with satellites and silent debris. Our birds fly under regulations. Our planes file flight plans. Nothing drifts without purpose. Nothing soars just because it can. But Quetzalcoatlus did, and it did it with no backup, no plan B, no version 2.0. It appeared. It ruled, and then it stopped. The evolutionary experiment ended not with failure, but with interruption. We often forget that. Extinction isn't always about being unfit. Sometimes it's about being perfect for a world that doesn't exist anymore. And when that world goes, so do its wonders. What else did we lose when the sky turned grey? Not just wings, not just bone, but a kind of permission for the planet to be weird, to be elegant and strange at the same time. There's a reason we put wings on angels, a reason we dream of flight, not because we envy birds, but because somewhere in us the memory remains. The sky once belonged to creatures so bold we still don't understand them. Quetzalcoatlus was never ours to understand. It didn't evolve for us, it didn't survive because of us, and it didn't disappear because we did anything. And yet we carry its image, we simulate it, render it, reconstruct it, because we need it. We need reminders that life can overshoot, that it doesn't always play safe, that sometimes evolution takes a leap, and that leap has wings. So no, the sky isn't silent, it's haunted by the shape of potential, by the absence of noise where noise used to be, by the absence of presence. We tell stories of dragons, we invent creatures that glide and hunt from above. But we didn't need to invent Quetzalcoatlus. It was real. And it did all those things. And if that doesn't terrify you, you're not thinking big enough. Extinction is easy to explain on paper. A meteor, a collapse, a climate event. You graph it, you map it, you date the layer of iridium in the rocks. But extinction is harder to understand in the mind, because it isn't just a loss of species. It's a loss of direction. Every extinction ends more than a creature. It ends a path, a route evolution was taking, a set of traits being tested, a style of being that might never appear again. That's what makes creatures like Quetzalcoatlus more than curiosities. They are the ghosts of possible futures, versions of life that reached a peak and then stepped aside, or were shoved. Think of everything Quetzalcoatlus represented. Flight without feathers, mass without clumsiness, predation without teeth, size without noise. That combination is gone now. Nothing alive today blends those traits. We're left with fragments, birds that fly, reptiles that glide, scavengers that walk, but nothing that merges them into one. It's like the evolutionary tree lost a branch, and now we only remember the shape of the leaves. Sometimes people ask, could we bring it back? Revive it? Clone it? Engineer it? But Quetzalcoatlus wasn't just DNA. It was a product of air pressure, planetary heat, atmospheric density, prey density, global climate, and eons of selection. You can't resurrect that with a genome. You'd have to resurrect a world, and even if we did, would we deserve to see it fly again? Because the truth is, we didn't just outlive the giants, we replaced them. We became the dominant species. The long-necked ruler of the plains gave way to us, the upright animal with tools and language. But our dominance comes with irony. We control the sky now, with missiles, jets, satellites, and drones. And yet, none of them inspire the same awe. None of them feel like life in motion. Only velocity, only noise. Quetzalcoatlus didn't need any of that. It ruled by presence, by simply being enormous, efficient, and inevitable. There's something almost humbling about that. It reminds us that dominance doesn't require intention, that evolution can create rulers without ambition, that nature doesn't care who's king, only that the system works. And sometimes, when a system stops working, the king dies first. That's the paradox of being at the top. You're the most specialized, the most refined, the most dependent on everything staying the same. And when the sky changed, Quetzalcoatlus had nowhere to go. We might be heading toward our own version of that story. Not with meteors, but with heat, collapse, overreach. Like the pterosaurs, we've specialized, built systems so large they can't fail, until they do. And in those moments, it's worth remembering what the sky once held. Not because we envy it, but because we are it. We are the inheritors of a fragile experiment called flight. Ours is artificial. Theirs was biological. But the rules are the same. Energy in, mass out, lift required, gravity undefeated. The pterosaurs played that game with bones and muscle. We play it with turbines and code. But in both cases, we are borrowing from nature. We are borrowing from the dead. And that debt always comes due. Quetzalcoatlus couldn't pay it. Its world changed too fast. And now we ask ourselves, can we? Because every fossil isn't just a reminder of what died. It's a reminder of what survived and what didn't. And we are still deciding which side of that line we'll end up on.